to this stage the Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Speaker, Carl Hastie. From the New York State Health Commissioner, Dr. Mary Bassett. The Deputy Director of Policy for Girls for Gender Equity, Quadrira Coles. And please join me in welcoming the 57th Governor of the... Please welcome the President of Cooper Union, Laura Sparks. Please join me in welcoming the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the students, faculty, staff, and trustees of the Cooper Union, it is truly my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome you today to witness a moment in history. We are honored to host Governor Kathy Hochul, the 57th governor and the first woman to serve as governor of the state of New York. I'm Laura Sparks, the 13th president of the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art, and as the first woman to serve as the president of this institution, I see the role of protecting women's rights and developing female leaders with the freedom to chart their own path as critical to advancing society. Governor Hochul recognizes the impact of this moment in the timeline of women's history in New York. She has chosen the Great Hall as today's venue where women have fought for their rights for more than 160 years. From a women's rights convention held by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in this room in 1860, to the first feminist mass meeting in 1914, where future U.S. Secretary of Labor Frances Perkins spoke, and I quote, "Feminism means revolution, and I am a revolutionist." Perkins paved the pathway for other revolutionists of the women's movement to stand on this very stage for the next century. Margaret Mead, Betty Friedan, and Gloria Steinem, among others, to advocate for equal treatment, rights, and access for women. In November of 1969, a Great Hall program on abortion and birth control was scheduled to feature 2 male speakers as experts on the topic. A few minutes into the program, a group of women took the stage, citing that, quote, "women are the only real experts to speak on this critical issue." Unfortunately, more than half a century later, the issue of a woman's right to choose remains a divisive matter in America. This right is currently threatened to be stripped from women across the nation, which is why we are here today. In a few moments, Governor Hochul will officially sign legislation ensuring New York State will continue to be a safe place for women from all over the nation to exert autonomy over their own bodies. Through this action, Governor Hochul will join this legacy of pioneers who have used their voices and their power on this stage to safeguard a better world for the next generation of women. Our mission at the Cooper Union supports the essence of this legislation, protecting and increasing access to the fundamental rights of all people. We prepare nearly 1,000 undergraduate and graduate students hailing largely from New York State, along with another 1,000 New Yorkers in our pre-college and adult education programs in architecture, art, and engineering to serve as inventive, creative, and influential voices to address the critical challenges and opportunities of our time. Peter Cooper founded the Cooper Union in 1859 to broaden the accessibility of high-quality education in New York regardless of gender, race, religion, or economic status. Upon opening, classes were free for the working class, and today, undergraduate tuition is still fully covered for students who otherwise could not afford to attend. This mission of access is just what Governor Hochul will commit to today for women of New York and the United States. Through this important legislation, she will once again put New York on the map as an advocate for reproductive health care, setting an example for other states to follow amid this threat of reduced access. It is this type of trailblazing, bold direction we need in our public leaders. It is now my great pleasure to welcome Governor Kathy Hochul.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. First, I want to thank Laura Sparks, the president of Cooper Union, for the introduction and for hosting us in this historic venue. As you said, this great hall, the very space we're in at this moment, played a pivotal role in the advancement, the long, often twisted journey toward women's rights. From that first meeting with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who challenged the status quo as they had done in other places. Frances Perkins, who became a leader in state government when FDR was governor, but also went on to define a generation of support for people in their time of need during the Great Depression when FDR became president. So this is the place that women's voices need to be heard. They have been heard, and after today, they'll be heard once again. And indeed, they will not just be heard, they will roar. And that is what we're doing here today. I want to thank the individuals you're going to be hearing from, as well as the countless elected officials, our members of Congress, Carolyn Maloney, Jerry Nadler, as well as our leaders and members of the Senate and the Assembly who are joined here today. But I mentioned the word leader, and the word leader gets thrown around a lot. But I had a chance in my 9 months as the governor of the state of New York to see leadership in action with the two individuals who their conferences have empowered and entrusted them to make decisions that represent their values. And I'm referring to Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who's done an amazing job. A trailblazer in her own right, who's had to overcome much, and we have much in common. We talk a lot about what we're going through. And also a man who understands, women's advancements occur when there are enlightened men who understand the challenges, and that's what we have in our speaker, Carl Heastie. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to thank our extraordinary Commissioner of Health, Dr. Mary Bassett, who we were able to draw upon her years of experience here in New York City, but to recruit her back from Harvard last fall at a time when I needed a real expert, someone who could be in the foxhole with me as we navigated through the remainder of Delta and, unbeknownst to us at the time, what Omicron would bring us. And I have to tell you, I am such a huge fan of hers, I've always been, but I want to thank her for her commitment to public health. It is extraordinary. Dr. Mary Bassett. Quadira Coles is the Deputy Director of Policy for Girls for Gender Equity. I want to thank her for, you'll hear her voices, for putting a spotlight on the needs of young women in particular. And I just want to thank the millions of allies in our state and across the nation who have come for years to our state capitol. I spoke probably the last 7, 8 years. You gather, you wear pink oftentimes, and we talk about what would happen if anyone ever decided to overturn Roe v. Wade. And it seemed so far-fetched. It seemed like we almost felt like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. How many times we say this? My friends, the sky is on the verge of falling literally in the next week or two. That is a very real possibility, and that's why we're here today. I have 3 messages regarding the persistent assault on women's rights and a woman's right to determine and make her own decisions about her own body. And they are simple messages. Not here, Not now, not ever. Thank you. Thank you. The women of New York will never be subjugated to government-mandated pregnancies, because that's what will ensue if Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court. This is the United States of America, where freedom and liberty are supposed to mean something. It's the rock upon which we were founded. It's supposed to mean something, except in the eyes of some Neanderthals who say women are not entitled to those rights. So we've endured centuries of misogyny and discrimination and domination, but they are all supposed to be over by now. This is 2022. The right to control our own bodies was supposed to be well-settled precedent by now, or so we thought. Must the hard-fought battles from my mother's generation, my generation, my 30-year-old daughter's generation, have to be inherited by my new granddaughter's generation as well? Well, apparently so. Back in May, millions of Americans read a leaked Supreme Court memo with horror and disgust. It reconfirmed our worst of fears, that the end of Roe v. Wade is actually near. But back then I said, while this decision is not final, and we pray that there's a change of heart, but I said, I need to act now as if it is final and react later. It meant and called upon all of us as leaders and working with the legislature to do what we've always done when our rights are under attack. Here's what we do. We stand up and we fight back. That is what we're doing. But make no mistake, this debate is not just about access, because the truth is, rich women, rich white women, will always find a way to secure an abortion. They always did. So this is also an attack on poor women, an attack on Black and brown women, an attack on new New Yorkers. It's intentional, it's unrelenting, it's the continuation of the Republicans' assault on women's right to an abortion. And it's been happening steadily and aggressively with each passing year. And for years, they've been trying to turn back the clock on the poor women who live in places like Texas and Florida and Georgia and Oklahoma. And now they've finally accomplished what they wanted. Do we have a politicized Supreme Court where people, when they come for their nomination, lie about their positions during their hearings under oath, about what they'd actually do? As I said, mark my words, we talk about those other states. Our heart goes out to the women in those other states. We'll be there for the women of other states. And mark my words, just never, never here in the state of New York, because New York has always been a beacon for those yearning to be free. And I want the world to hear that that'll never change. We will stand up, we will fight back, just like we did when I had the privilege as Lieutenant Governor, my role as President of the Senate, to preside in 2019 for the passage of the Reproductive Health Act, basically enshrining the rights of Roe v. Wade. Thank you to the legislature for making that happen. Thank you. And in so doing, we confirm that reproductive freedom is a basic human right. Let me say that again, a basic human right. And it's a right that this state will defend with the full power invested within our state government. But I also know that abortion rights mean little without abortion access. So in my first budget as governor, we made it a requirement that all health plans in New York cover abortion services. And in May, when the Supreme Court opinion was leaked, and many were busy wringing their hands, what are we going to do? I challenged my team to stand up and tell me, in their best judgment, and based upon what legislators have already put forward, identify the immediate actions that could be taken at this time. And we acted quickly. We put together an agenda, a plan. But it also started with saying resources are now needed. With the support and funding from our Department of Health, thank you, Dr. Mayor Bassett, with a nation-leading investment of $35 million to create the Abortion Services Provider Fund. First time ever. $25 million of that is to expand abortion services already here in the state of New York, to ensure access for patients seeking abortion care. And believe it or not, they're already having to come from other states. Western New York Planned Parenthood, busy taking women seeking access from the state of Ohio just 3 hours down the road. That's just the beginning, my friends. That is just the beginning. We also know we have to protect these centers. So we allocated $10 million in grants for reproductive health care centers because we've already seen the threats of anti-abortion violence. And the climate out there is just getting more extreme every single day, and it's only going to get worse. So we need to be ready for that as well. So that's what we do here in New York. We don't talk, we act. We don't follow, we lead. We don't wait, we get to work. And when I announced that funding, I said, this is not our last countermeasure in the fight against the destruction of our freedoms. Today, we go even further. Today, I'll be signing 6 bills that are landmark protections for abortion providers and their patients. And we'll say once again, look to New York for a nation-leading response to this crisis. Under the first bill that I'll be signing, we're allowing New Yorkers to file lawsuits against people who are trying to limit their reproductive freedom. I want to thank sponsor Senator Biaggi and member of the Assembly Burdick for your support in this legislation. Number 2, if a woman is wanted in another state, this is what we're talking about. I mean, this is how scary this gets. This is not some futuristic film or book, science fiction. No, if a woman is wanted under criminal charges in another state, we're going to take steps to protect them from extradition. Thank you, Senator Kruger, and thank you, Assembly Member Levine, Chuck Levine. We're also going to be defending abortion providers from medical malpractice and licensure issues, and I thank Senator Hinchey and Member of Assembly Rosenthal, Senator Kaplan, and again, Assembly Member Rosenthal for your support on these 2 bills. We're also making sure that providers and their families can keep their addresses confidential and keep themselves safe. And I thank Senator Cleary and Member of Assembly Paulin for realizing that these are people who really are heroes. What they and their staffs have to endure, and when there have been assaults and threats, I have gone to these clinics just to lend my support. And in my home in Buffalo, I live down the hall from an older couple who, when they learned we were going to be taking these steps a few weeks ago, the woman hugged me tightly And I asked her why this was so personal to her. And she said, because my husband, doctor down the hall from me, had been an abortion provider before 1970. And she says, I was his nurse. She started crying and she says, I can't tell you how many lives we lost because people would come in after they tried to have an abortion at home or literally in the back alleys, and they failed and they came in and they bled to death in their office. All these years later, this was an emotional experience for her to think that we could go back to that time. So we are going to protect these providers and their families, and this legislation today will accomplish that, and we're not finished with it as well. We're also going to have a task force to study the impact of limited service pregnancy centers. We all know what that means on pregnant women. Thank you, Senator Hoylman, and Member of Assembly Glick as well. Assembly Member Glick, thank you. So, this legislation is just one more way we say that New York is leading, and we'll always stand up against attacks on our bodily autonomy. That's what this is about. Because as the first female governor of New York, I take this personally. And that's a fight I'm willing to take on, not just on behalf of the women of New York, but for women all across this nation. I refuse to go backwards. And I promise you, as long as I'm governor, we will not. Because these are rights that have been fought for generations, and New York State has led every step of the way. We've been trailblazing, as you mentioned early in this room, all the people who stood up against the tides of their time, so bold, so courageous. And I'm also thinking of the women who fought for the right to control their own bodies and have an abortion in New York 3 years before Roe v. Wade. We were there for women then. We're there for women now, not just here, but all across this country. But make no mistake, this is not just an attack on reproductive health and freedom. It's an attack on the very values that make New York what it is. And that's why, with a stroke of a pen, I will say, not here, not in New York, not ever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me bring up to the podium a great leader, Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Yay! Not in New York, not now, not ever, not in New York, not now, not ever. Not in New York, not now, not ever. Yes. I am just I'm happy, but I'm not happy to be here. Certainly happy that we have the great leadership of our governor, Governor Kathy Hochul, the first woman governor, and yes, this is clearly personal. She wasted no time to make sure that we prepared for what seems to be the inevitable. I also want to thank my colleague and friend, Speaker Hasty, who is always ready to stand up for the women. As the governor says, he's a man who understands, and I appreciate your leadership and your friendship. And yes, Dr. Bassett, you are a welcome addition. Thank you so very much for being here. And Ms. Coles, I look forward to working with you and hearing from you. And again, President Sparks, what an honor to be here in this great hall. Thank you for hosting us. I was thinking about what to say because, I never really know what I'm going to say until I show up. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's... But the last time I was with the governor, it was about gun violence. and what we did to deal with the insanity of mass murders and the gun violence that is a inherently American problem. And I got a pen, and I have the pen, and today I'm going to get another pen. And I was saying to myself, I like pens, but I don't want these pens. I don't want to have to be here fighting for things that we should not have to fight about. In 1970, I was a teenage New Yorker who was pregnant. And New York was one of the few states at the time with 12 Republicans who joined Democrats to make sure that women in New York had a choice about their reproductive capacity and what they wanted to do. I didn't know anything about the legislature. I didn't know how that happened, to be honest. All I knew is that I was pregnant and I had a choice. When I ran and won, I ran on the fact that because we predated Roe v. Wade, our statutes were still in the criminal codes and not in health codes, and we weren't even up to date with the 1973 law. And it made no sense to me. And in 2007, I carried the bill which ultimately Senator Kruger passed when we got to the majority in 2019 that said we must codify, we must update our reproductive health laws. It made perfect sense. And every time one-on-one I talked to somebody, they'd say, oh yeah, well, is that so? They were happy about the fact that we predated Roe, but they understood. And we could not do it. In fact, they laughed at me and they said, oh, you're just looking for attention. My offices were attacked. They had rallies against my actually having the nerve. I was shocked to carry a bill that suggested that we should have reproductive health updates. And when we got to the majority in 2019, one of the first things we did, thank you to my incredible Senate majority, because we know the Assembly was trying to do it. Yeah. All right, but it took a Senate majority of Democrats who actually got it done. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And why do I say that? Because even then, even though in 1970 there were Republicans who were willing to vote for a woman's right to reproductive choices, in 2019, not one Republican was willing to codify a 1973 law in 2019. And here we are in 2022, awaiting what we all know will probably be the end of Roe v. Wade as a constitutional right. But here in New York, not only are we saying, not in New York, not now, not ever, and at the ready to help women who have to flee their states in order to have the reproductive care they need. And these bills today will say that we will not aid and abet anyone who wants to criminalize our right to choose. That's what we're saying today. And we're not done yet, because as you chip away, as you chip away, as you chip away, We will continue to find new ways to stop your attack on our ability to govern our own lives and our reproductive choices. Do you know why? Because we're going to end the way we began. Because this is New York. And in New York, not in New York, not now, not ever. Again, not in New York, not now, not ever. Not in New York, not now, not ever. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the podium Speaker Carl Hastings.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, everybody, for coming today. As the majority leader says, the day I wish we didn't have to come and be here. But I'm so proud of the work that we've done together in partnership, particularly with Governor Hochul and Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and both of our conferences. I would like to thank our extraordinary bill sponsors, Linda Rosenthal, Amy Paulin, Chuck Levine, Chris Burdick, for all of their hard work and dedication to this issue, and of course to Deborah Glick, who not only sponsored one of the bills being signed into law today, but also carried the Reproductive Health Act in the Assembly for years and has been a tireless fighter for women. I often like to remind people that I remember when Deborah was debating this bill and our colleagues across on the other side of the aisle, one after another, kept getting up and saying that this was so unnecessary. Why are we doing this? But here it is, about 3 years later, we're understanding why it was so important for Deborah to have that long and important debate about a woman's right to choose. But I also, and I know they were mentioned, but I want to take the time to mention all of the other great Assembly members who are here: Rebecca Seawright, Catalina Cruz, Nili Rosick, Jonathan Jacobson, Emily Gallagher, Steve Otis, Joanne Simon, Dee Dee Barrett, I heard Natalia Fernandez, Jessica Gonzalez-Rojas, and Jennifer Rajkumar for their important leadership on these topics. But what we did, and the governor mentioned it, we worked quickly to put together legislation to make sure that New York does the right thing by women. I've said it before, and I will continue to say, I believe the Supreme Court has no right to tell women what to do with your bodies. But here we are, having to stand up for women because our federal courts are not going to do that. And I do like to remind people, elections have consequences. When you elect the President of the United States, they get to nominate the members of the Supreme Court. Heck, even the Republican Party denied that from President Obama because they knew they wanted to do this. They knew they wanted to have a strong majority on the court that would tell women what to do with their bodies. But here we are in New York, doing the right thing by protecting women, protecting providers, and protecting choice. Thank you all for being here today.
Please welcome to the podium the New York State Health Commissioner, Dr. Mary Bassett.
Well, Governor Hochul, Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins, Speaker Hasty, and all of the many elected officials who are here today. As the New York City Health Commissioner, I thank you for your leadership in these uncertain times. My 35 years in public health have taught me how centrally important it is to have political leadership that understands the importance of public health. I never imagined in my lifetime that we would be in the position where we fully expect the Supreme Court of the United States to roll back the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, ending half a century of federal constitutionally protected abortion rights. Some 26 states, home to more than half of the population of reproductive age in this country, are poised to further roll back abortion rights. If this happens, Many states will not permit exceptions for pregnancies that result from rape or incest. And doctors in many states will be pressed to make difficult assessments about the risks to the mother, as pregnancy that threatens the life of the mother will typically remain in place. Today, these decisions are left to the person who's pregnant and their healthcare provider, and this now will become something of increased scrutiny. But here in New York State, as we've all been hearing, the protection of abortion rights is enshrined in the law, and today these legal rights are being bolstered. New York is and continues to be a beacon of hope, a safe harbor, a sanctuary. As you've all heard, New York State legalized abortion 3 years before Roe and is home to the first Planned Parenthood Center to offer abortion services. Since 1970, New York State has stood by the right to abortion across administrations, Republican and Democratic, and we are now poised to again be an example to the nation. Before Roe and after 1970, nearly 2/3 of the abortions performed in New York State were for women who came from outside of New York to obtain these safe and legal services. And that's why the governor has provided $25 million so that we can bolster these services, so that in New York, abortion is and will remain safe, legal, available, accessible. As we work to keep abortion safe and accessible, we also need to strengthen family planning services, empowering all New Yorkers to take charge of their sexual health. You know, it still bears repeating, I think, that when safe abortion is stripped away, it doesn't stop abortions. It never has. But abortions become more deadly and dangerous, and access to safe abortion will be filtered through the inequities in our society, and this will be particularly true for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. The new barriers will mean that communities of color and all those who are low income will lack easy access. This will further entrench longstanding inequities. So, safe abortions are part of our medical and physical well-being, but they also provide us with something just as important, the right to autonomy, the right to a choice that is so entwined with the many other choices that a person makes in their lifetime, the choice to learn, the choice to work, the choice to protect one's mental health, and the list goes on. All of these are bound up in the right to safe, legal, and affordable, accessible abortion. Without federal guarantees, these fundamental reproductive rights will need to be held together by the strength and the will of the people and state policy and local policies. I want to thank President Sparks for reminding us of the historic nature of this hall, also echoed by our governor. I saw these words as I walked in today, and I'm going to echo them now. They were spoken by Abraham Lincoln over 150 years ago. I have faith that right makes might. Let me say that again. I have faith that right makes might. And together with the leadership of Kathy Hochul and the rest of the legislature, we will continue to protect these rights so that everyone knows that they have a right to health and they have a right to choice and a right to their life as they choose to live it. New York will never stop fighting for you and your rights. Abortion must and will remain safe, legal, and accessible. Thank you.
Please welcome to the podium Quadira Coles.
Ooh, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Quadira Coles, and I'm here on behalf of all the Black girls across this country, all the transgender and gender nonconforming siblings, a population that we serve at Girls for Gender Equity, my colleagues here, and as the president of New Jersey Abortion Access Fund, where I'm witnessing the bubbling effect of restrictions on abortion across this country. I'm going to start off by saying Roe was never enough. The reality of that statement is settling with every opportunity that is passed and access to safe abortion care isn't being safeguarded. Today, we are laying down the foundation to ensure that New York is a safe haven for anyone who wants an abortion and anyone who wants to provide that care. I want to commend and thank all of the reproductive justice and gender equity advocates for pivoting and mobilizing so swiftly in order to meet this time of crisis with bold action. It is our powerful collective advocacy that allows us to be here today to solidify protections to abortion care and close the pathways that allows us to be criminalized for our right to choose. The Supreme Court has already signaled its intention to overturn Roe v. Wade. And across the country, abortion funds are seeing a massive influx for traveling patients seeking care for safer and more accessible abortions. Anyone with the will and the ability to make this a safe reality has an obligation to show up and fight. But we can't do this alone. Our other states need to be proactive in ensuring that the same protections are awarded to service providers, volunteers, caregivers who support a person's right to bodily autonomy. I supported 2 friends at the age of 15 and 16 in getting an abortion. Now imagine if we lived in southern states. All 3 of us would have been criminalized. A threat to our basic right to make decisions for ourselves and our families, whatever that may look like, is a dangerous thing to bypass. Restrictions on abortion access disproportionately impacts people of low income, people of immigrant status, Black people, Hispanic people, LGBTQ people, and our youth. And God forbid you are at the intersection of more than one of these identities. We know that all around reproductive health care is a challenging experience at any juncture of your life. And there are states intentionally making it hard to live a life of self-determination. Our bodies are not a monopoly. Our freedoms and liberties are debate. And we should all be defending abortion access because it's an intersectional and intergenerational, multi-layered issue. It is racial justice, gender justice, youth justice, health justice, and economic justice. It touches every single last one of us one way or another, and we will see a reproductive revolution in this lifetime. Thank you to the governor and all the bill sponsors, and most importantly to all the advocates who have been fighting for years, way before I was even born. I am really grateful to be here today. I am only 28 years old, and I am a part of a generation who will continue this fight. Your work, our ancestors' work, would never be in vain. Thank you.
It's now time to sign some bills. For all in attendance, please remain seated during the bill signing photos. Thank you. Please remain seated during the bill signing photos.
You guys want to, why don't you each take a side so you're right in the center here. Carl, you want to call it? That's great. Okay. We're going to do it for you. Okay.
This takes a lot of practice to use every single pen.
I've done a few of these. Yeah.
Long name. I'm putting a lot of Captain Hochul.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Write down a name.
My real name is Kathleen Mary Courtney Hochul, so if I ever
Oh,
need
you couldn't.
I just don't want to do it that long. All right. The bill is signed.
Well done.
All right.